to demonstrate to you today why you need to run webinars. I'll show you how to create a webinar presentation, and I'm going to give you a basic outline for the essential steps that you're going to have to take to set up your webinar and run it. So what is a webinar? Well, most of you already know, I'm sure, but for those of you who don't, I'm going to give you a definition by Wikipedia, and they say that a webinar is a presentation, lecture, workshop, or seminar that's transmitted over the web using video conferencing software. So why would you want to run a webinar? Okay, so there are quite a number of reasons. I'm going to quote a few stats here. Let's start off with the first reason why you should be running webinars. So the first reason is that they generate qualified leads and engage them. Now, obviously, this is what this is all about. So the whole reason for marketing is to produce leads who turn into customers. The Online Marketing Institute has put together what they call a customer journey, and it's a series of steps that a customer takes from the point at which they know nothing about you or your product to the point at which they buy. I've modified this slightly, so let's take a look at the diagram here. Now, the first step is not a step that the customer takes. It's actually something that you as the marketer do, and that is to set up your perfect prospect profile. Now, let me tell you, saying 3 P's in a row is not easy, but anyway, perfect prospect profile. Okay, so this is when you decide what's the kind of person that's going to buy your product. If you're selling a series of classes for people with disobedient dogs, you might perhaps go to a social media group for precisely those people, where they're sharing information about how they can actually solve their problem because they're not getting any sleep at night. Their dog is keeping them awake. It keeps barking. So that's where you're going to participate in the social media, post things, or you're going to place ads, one or the other. So you've joined such a group, or you've placed ads in the right place where you're likely to attract the sort of person that you're looking for. And that's when somebody's going to see your ad, and for the first time, they're going to become aware of you and the service that you're offering or the product that you're selling. At that point, they're very unlikely to buy. The statistics show it's incredibly low, the number of people who will buy at that stage. How do they know that you're not selling a dud product? So your job now is to convince them that your product is the best one they could possibly buy, and that you are a person that they can trust. Now, the Online Marketing Institute has statistics that show that it takes between 7 and 13 touch points before someone will buy from you. So they've got to see an ad that you've placed, or perhaps another touch point might be that they signed up for one of your newsletters and they receive email from you. That's another touch point. Or maybe they've listened to one of your podcasts or seen one of your videos, but they need to have 7 to 13 such touch points before they are likely to buy from you. So once they have one or more touch points, what they're going to be doing is assimilating not just the offer, is it the solution to their big problem or not, but also you. They're assimilating you. Are you someone that they feel has the authority to promote such a product? Do you know enough about it? Is it going to be a quality product? And what about you? Are you an honourable person? They're assimilating all of this at that point. And obviously, they are going to compare you to the competition. Do you come across as more trustworthy than others that they're looking at? And very importantly, is the product the one for them? Is it going to change their lives? Because when people buy, that's what they want. They want something that's going to change their lives by taking away a problem that they've got. And then the Online Marketing Institute has put together something they call BANT. So people, once they've seen quite a number of touch points and they're sort of really quite close to deciding, yes, it is the thing that they want, what you're providing. There's something called BANT, and once they get past the BANT point, they will be ready to purchase. So what does BANT stand for? It stands for B is for budget. Do they have enough money? A is for authority. Do they think you have the authority and that you're selling a trustworthy product and that you're trustworthy yourself and that it's going to solve their problem? N, do they have the need for that product? Is it an overwhelming need and they feel that they can't do without it? And if you chose people with the perfect prospect profile, the 3 Ps at the beginning, then they are likely to have that overwhelming need. And T in BANT is for time frame. Is what you're offering going to give them what they want within the time frame they want? If you're selling a lotion that relieves pain, are you saying you've got to apply this for 3 months before it works? Or are you saying it's within a week? It might even for some people be immediate pain relief. So once all of those BANT, all of those criteria are met, you got them. They're going to buy from you. They're going to purchase. But that last bit, those last 2 points, the BANT and the purchase bit, you might not have quite got there to the purchase point. And that's where the webinar is invaluable. And that's what we're going to talk about now. What it can do is supply any extra information that they might want, because a webinar can be 40 minutes, 1 hour, some are even 2 hours long. I think that's a bit too long, but some are 2 hours long. But there's enough time within a webinar to give them sufficient information. They may have seen your recorded stuff before, your recorded ads, videos, podcasts, but they haven't seen you live. So the webinar gives you an opportunity to interact with them live and really connect deeply with them, so that that webinar might give it the final turn so that they're switched totally on and they're ready to purchase.
Okie dokie, me hearties. That's reason 1 for why you should run a webinar. Now let's go on and have a look at reason 2. Reason 2 of why you should be running webinars is that they provide value and show your leads that you mean business. So yes, that's what webinars are all about. You really want to provide value, and you can do that by making absolutely certain that firstly and foremost you are providing the solution to their number 1 problem. And if you manage to produce a top-notch webinar which is over brimming with value, then they're likely not only to make 1 purchase but to become a fan and make long-term purchases from you, repeat ones, over time. Okay then, and now the 3rd reason why you should be doing webinars, and that is a nice short one. It is that 73% of business to business marketers say a webinar is the best way, that is the best way to generate high quality leads, and you simply can't argue with that. And moving swiftly on, reason number 4 is that recent studies suggest that 20 to 40% of webinar attendees turn into qualified leads, and that's amazingly high. And the 5th reason that you should run webinars is that they build authority around a brand. If you've been listening to me for any time at all, you'll know that your brand is yourself. A webinar gives you the opportunity to establish yourself as the expert in the field and to build your fan base. And even if you change your business allegiances and the products and services, your fan base is still likely to stick with you and be interested in those new offers that you have. Reason number 6 of why you should be doing webinars is that they give a higher ROI, that's return on investment, than other marketing methods. So that if you use a marketing method with a lower ROI and you spend exactly the same amount on implementing your marketing, then you would have a far lower profit. In other words, webinars tend to give high profit margins. Hey guys, we're in the home straight now, and here's the last reason why you should be doing webinars, and that's because they build and nurture relationships and create loyalty. And you may think this may be the most important one, because of course marketing is all about relationship building, and what you want to do is build a loyal group of followers who will buy from you over and over again.
So the question now is not why would you want to run a webinar, but rather why would you not want to run webinars? So we're now going to look through the steps that you need to take pre-webinar, and that's looking at the processes that you have to perform and also the planning that you have to do. Also, for the webinar itself, the processes that you need to go through and the planning that you need to do beforehand, and then the wrap up, the follow up after you've run your webinar, what processes you need to undertake, and the planning that you need to have done beforehand. So let's have a look through all of those steps one by one in each of those categories.
So we're going to start off by looking at the pre-webinar process. That's what you do before your webinar to prepare for it. So the 3 things that you need to do before you hold your webinar are: number 1, build an audience; number 2, follow up with registrants; and number 3, have a targeted registration page where people can register for the webinar. So at this stage, you've already built up a presence on multiple social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Amazon Alexa, and Pinterest, maybe other ones as well. So what you want to do now is use engagement marketing to build your followers and convert them into your fan base. So in ads and or posts, you're going to be releasing snippets of information about you and your life so that they feel that they're getting to know you as a person and building more intimacy with you. And in the follow-up session, which is a webinar, I'll be telling you all about an absolutely amazing online training course which shows you step by step how to gain traction on multiple different social media platforms and pull in hordes of new followers that you can engage regularly with one piece of content that is syndicated to all of the different platforms. And if you want to build up your fan base quickly, then this is the best course I've ever found for doing that. Okay, slight diversion there, but getting back to engagement marketing, what you're doing is making them feel more comfortable and familiar with you, so that even with just a very occasional mention of the product or service, without broadcasting it to them, you'll find that they come to you to ask you about it, rather than you having to go out and hustle for business. Okay, so now you've got a number of your followers interested in your product or service, and the next step is either in your ad or your post to add a CTA. That's a call to action, and that is to direct them to your webinar registration page. You're now at the very end of the customer journey that I described earlier, and you're hoping that your customers are ready to buy. Now, the webinar registration page is going to look something like this. Now, you've already used attraction marketing to drip feed the value of your product or services to your potential customers, and you've used your CTA to get them to this registration page. And look, it's a waste of time nurturing leads who aren't yet ready to make a buying decision or don't have the resources to buy, or leads for whom this is just simply not the right product. So basically you want to disincentivize those people from attending the webinar. You only want really keen people as attendees. And in simple terms, this is how you achieve that. You've already had a series of very targeted ads or posts, and now you follow that up with a very targeted registration page. Now we're only covering the basics in this session, but we will have a follow-up session when we'll go into far more detail where this is concerned. But let's just say that you're going to be selling customers on what they stand to gain. For example, if we look at the disobedient dog scenario, you'd be selling peace of mind and a good night's sleep, but you won't be selling dog training for delinquent puppies. And of course, one of the most vital parts of the targeted registration page is the email form here, where they're going to sign up for your webinar. And ideally you want them to sign up for the webinar, but in tandem with that, you want them to sign up for your email list so that you can continue to send them information about the product and continue to nurture them and keep them in the loop. Okay, so those are the pre-webinar processes that you're going to have to carry out before your webinar. But what's the planning that you're going to have to do so that you can actually carry those out? Well, let's have a look. It's vitally important that you choose the right webinar software. Now, I myself chose the wrong software when I first started off doing webinars. It was a complete and utter nightmare, hugely labor intensive, and to be quite frank with you, I don't think I got it right at the end of the day at all. I only ever used it once, and it was an expense that really I could have done without. I would have wanted it to work first time around. So what are the different things that can go wrong with a webinar? Well, first of all, communication emails might not go through. If it's not a good webinar platform, participants perhaps won't be able to install the conferencing software. Maybe they won't be able to see or hear the webinar properly. Maybe the presenters won't be able to supply good, clean audio, and other things that are not to do with the software, but just that things that can go wrong, like perhaps the presenter's computer might crash during the presentation, or the presenter might lose internet or phone connectivity during the presentation, or perhaps the actual software, the conferencing software itself, could crash. And lastly, if you're using slides, for example PowerPoint, maybe they won't display properly during the webinar. So there are lots of things you need to think about beforehand and do some contingency planning so that whatever goes wrong, you've got a plan B. You've got a plan B to put that right. But most importantly, you need to choose a good, reputable software for your webinars. And in the follow-up session to this, I'm going to invite you to a webinar where I'll go into much more detail about everything that I've covered in this session. And I'll also tell you about a good webinar software that I'm using myself. Okay, so since we're talking about software, you will have noticed that there was an email form on the webinar registration page, and that you want them to sign up for your newsletter or your list, as well as signing up for the webinar. And to put that into operation, you need to have an autoresponder system. Now, these can be quite pricey as your list grows, especially if they charged per subscriber. So I'm going to tell you about something that I use in the follow-up session to this, something that is a reasonable price and does work. Okay, next you want to decide on a memorable and punchy name for your offer. Now, that's the obvious thing to do if you are promoting your own product or service, but it's something that you should also do even if your offer is an affiliate product or service. Now, why would you do that? You do it because if, for example, you're promoting, say, booking.com, I looked it up and found out it was one of the most popular affiliate programs that people offer. So if it was booking.com, if you actually advertised your webinar as booking.com, they're not going to bother coming to it. They're just going to search on the web and find booking.com and go directly to it. So you're going to have to give it a name, a snappy name, and think up something like My Crazy One-Stop Travel Shop. There we go. How's that for a name? So now the last thing that you want to do in your pre-webinar planning phase is make an outline for your webinar. Now I'm sure that there are some people who are very gifted and can just do it like that without making a plan, but certainly most people will need to spend time putting the whole thing together. And obviously, the longer that you're doing this kind of thing, the faster you get. But certainly at the beginning, it is going to take some time to put together a good plan. And once you have done that, it's always a good idea to practice it several times before you actually go live. Okay, now so we've completed looking at what you need to do pre-webinar as far as processes are concerned and as far as planning is concerned. So now it's time to look at the processes that you will have to undertake when you actually deliver your webinar. But I'm just going to run quickly through some of the essentials that you have to have in your webinar. First one obviously is a really catchy headline. It's going to be the same headline that you used on your webinar registration page, which hooks people in who are going to be really interested in your product, have a great need for it, and have the resources to actually purchase it. And then you want to establish trust and also authority and credibility. You want to impress on others that you have experience in the field and the ability to guide and help others. And you're going to use a bio which is long enough but not too long to achieve this. You also want to set the right ambiance, enthusiastic but not too enthusiastic. But whatever you do, not everyone is going to like your style. There's something called the Pareto effect, which says that 80% of your sales are going to come from 20% of your most engaged fans. So not everyone is going to love you, I'm afraid. But if you've got 20% of your fans buying, you're laughing. And absolutely vital now is that you give value in your webinar. They have a problem, it's destroying their lives, and you want to give them information that they've never heard before that's going to turn everything round for them. So it's all about value, and you want to give them an irresistible offer. For example, you might say that migraine is caused by different things for different people, and I will give you a 30-minute free coaching session to help you identify what the triggers are for your own personal migraine. And whether it's potato or patata or migraine or migraine, it's up to you to decide, guys. Now look, it's really important that your registrants stay till the end of the webinar, because that's the point at which you're going to give them the call to action. The whole reason for you putting in so much work to prepare a webinar. You want them to stay till the end, so you can give them a bonus. It's a long view incentive. For example, you might say, and do make sure that you stay to the end of the webinar, because if you do, what I'm going to do is give you a download link for a cheat sheet which lists all the research that I've done over the last 10 years, and this cheat sheet is going to give you the top 10 remedies that I've found after extensive research that cure migraine. Okay, and as just mentioned, of course, the CTA, the call to action, is essential. When they click on it, it's going to take them to the sales page. Obviously, the CTAs are going to be closer to the end of the webinar. And when you've got to the point where you've introduced the CTA at least once, then you're more or less at the end of your webinar. So that's it. Or is it? Have I left something out? What do you reckon? Well, let me tell you, I've left something out purposefully because there is something which is almost the most important thing. And that is, can you guess? Storytelling. The way that you're going to get across to your audience that the product or the service works is through storytelling. And you're going to tell your own story, your own experience with the product or the service, or somebody else's, a third party story. A great way to do this is through talking through your story, but you can also use other things such as PowerPoint, videos, screen sharing. And as we talked about earlier, you're selling not the product or the service, but what you're selling is what the customer is going to gain by purchasing it. And storytelling and giving case studies is the absolute ideal way to do this, because you can paint the picture of how the back pain lotion eliminated your pain altogether and gave you your first good night's sleep in several months. Or you can describe through a case study or a testimonial how Billy got his love life back because he was able to afford to take someone out on a date for the first time since he got into perpetual debt because of the book that you wrote and that he purchased that explained to him how he could do that mega fast. Okay, so that really is it for this section, guys. So what we're going to do now is move on to look at the planning that you have to do before you run your webinar to ensure that you can carry out these steps during the webinar. Now we'll go into more detail about this in the follow-up webinar, but basically you do want to get your bio, your sales page and your bonuses planned and ready to go. You want to get your lighting and your background ready. Do you want to look like you're working from the office or sitting on a sofa in the comfort of your own home? Or do you want to use a green screen and have a flashy video behind you? And of course, we talked about mishaps earlier, and you want to make sure that you have contingency plans no matter what happens, whatever goes wrong during the webinar. And believe you me, I've seen a lot of things go wrong in a lot of webinars that I've been to. You want to be sure that you feel that you can cope with whatever. And one of the most important things is that you've got to believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, you're going to come across as credible and believable to your audience. Now, one bit about believing in yourself is believing in yourself psychologically. And all of the really big, successful multimillionaires that you can think of them, or most of them, mention that they actually have coaching in order to work on themselves at a psychological level so that they do have great confidence and they can work their way through the barriers that life throws at them and end up being winners. To be honest, it's only the people that you meet who are real losers who think that they don't need that kind of thing, who think that it's a weakness to ask someone to help them in that way. But conversely, when you're looking at being sure of yourself when it comes to the offer that you're making, obviously, I personally would never ever try to market something that I didn't have huge confidence in. I really want to sell things that are going to be incredibly valuable to people. So I keep my eye open for that. And if you're doing that as well, then you're going to be sure. But the other thing is you want to be sure that you know the field extremely well. Now, you may not be an expert. All of us have to start somewhere and work our way up. But it's a good idea to do a lot of background work before you do try to promote something, so that you do know a great deal about it. You won't know everything. You've probably got a steep learning curve over many years, but you at least want to know a very fair amount about it, so that you feel confident when you're promoting something in this field to other people. So what I'm saying is, do your homework. Okay, so folks, that wraps up the webinar portion of this session, and we're now going to go on and look at the processes that you're going to have to carry out post webinar, that is after you've actually held your webinar. So as you all know, I am the Whizz online marketer, so we're going to whiz through those, and those are: number 1, retarget uncommitted registrants; number 2, nurture and mentor purchasers; number 3, hold a webinar for the BizOp; and number 4, analyze your results. So now let's go through those one at a time in a little bit more detail. Now, obviously, not everyone is going to sign up for the offer who come to your webinar. As I said earlier, you would expect maybe 20% of your fan base to actually purchase what you're offering. So during the webinar, you're going to hope that they will sign up immediately, and you're probably going to give them a time limited offer to induce them to do that. And we'll talk about that more in the follow-on session. But there are going to be a fair number of people who are still undecided at the end of the webinar. And what you're going to want to do is retarget them, and one of the ways you can do that is through your email list, because if you did connect your registration page to your email list, then you can continue to send them emails. So you send them a sequence of emails and hope that some of them at the end of that sequence decide that they do want to buy. You might offer more incentives, more bonuses. It's basically giving them more information and hoping that they will buy. Perhaps they didn't buy because they couldn't afford it. Perhaps they're waiting for payday. There are lots of different reasons why people don't sign up immediately, but it's a well-known fact that it's during that period of time when you are retargeting that you can really boost the number of people who do invest in what you're offering. And it's in exactly the same way that you want to continue to nurture those fans who did actually sign up for the offer. And the reason you're doing that is to continue to support them, and also to nurture them so that when you release your next product, they might be interested in buying that also. You might even have current offers that you can either upsell or downsell to them through your email sequence, and that's probably going to be a different email sequence to the one that you're using to retarget those people who haven't purchased yet. Now, your initial offer was for the product or the service, but what you're going to want to do in a lot of cases is also recruit perhaps affiliates to sell the product as well, because you will get a cut from their sales. So the next thing that you want to do once they have purchased the product or the service is to introduce the business op to them. And you can do that through your email sequence. You can take them through that sequence, maybe of perhaps 7 emails, and at the end of it, invite them to another webinar where you will introduce the business op to them. So as you can see, there's plenty to do after the webinar is over. One of the most important things you need to do is to nurture your purchasers, because it is many, many times harder to resell a new product to somebody who's never bought from you before compared to someone who has purchased. So you want to treat those fans who have purchased from you like kings and queens, so that they will purchase again in the future. So we've now concluded our look at the processes that you will have to undertake at the end of your webinar. And we're now going to finish up by looking at the planning that you're going to have to do in order to carry out those processes. So you're going to have to plan your retargeting system. We've already talked about retargeting through your emails, your email list, and an email sequence. But there's also retargeting on social media platforms such as Facebook and quite a number of others, as well as Google. Now that's a whole topic in itself for at least one session, probably more, but all I'll say is there are other things you can do. For example, you can place a pixel, a small bit of code, on your sales page and also on your thank you page. Now the thank you page is the page that they go to when they want to buy your product. So some people might go to the sales page and no further, or they might go to the thank you page but not actually go ahead and finish off their purchase. So you might want to retarget the people who had done that because they have shown an interest, and you can do that if you use the pixels provided by many of the social media platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn or Pinterest. And another thing you want to do is plan and put together follow-on webinars for the business op or for ancillary products that are related to the product that the person is interested in or has actually purchased. And lastly, what you want to do is set up systems to analyze the sales results that you've got and play around with those, play around with your systems until you feel that you've optimized them. And this is a massive topic, far too big to cover in a short session like this, but obviously it's something that I will be looking at, so do be sure to subscribe to my blog, as I will be doing just this kind of thing.
And so thank you so much for tuning into this session. I hope that it's brought you some value or introduced you to some little gems that you weren't aware of. Now, as I said before, the session is really to introduce you to the basics of setting up and running a webinar. And what I'd like to do now is invite you to an actual webinar in which I'm going to go into much more detail and tell you step by step how you can put together your webinar by giving you a webinar template that you'll be able to download, and also by letting you know what kind of platforms I use to run my webinar, and also that I use as an autoresponder, because I made mistakes at the beginning by choosing the wrong platforms, and I really wouldn't like to see anyone else do the same thing.
Now, you're not going to succeed with any webinar, no matter how good it is, if you aren't able to nurture a fan base and bring a large number of people in to see your webinar. Unless, of course, you're mega wealthy and can spend a fortune on placing ads. Now, of course, most of us aren't like that, especially when we start out. So you're going to have the skills and the knowledge to pull people in. And that's something that is the stumbling block for most people. And in the webinar, I'm going to tell you about the best training course I have ever seen, which helps you to recruit bucket loads of followers on social media that you can funnel into your webinars. It's something that I'm so glad I didn't walk by, and I think it's something that anyone who wants to be mega successful with online marketing should really take a serious look at. So if you'd like to attend the webinar to find out more, then just click on the link in the description. Or if you're listening to this, not watching it, visit my blog, which is www.7-minutes-to-midnight.com, and choose webinars from the menu. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time, be sure to innovate, illuminate, and light the way. And why would you do that? Because you are a diamond and you're about to outsparkle the world.